What's up, guys? So, as some of you may have seen in the thumbnail, I am going to be beginning a hero guide series. In this guide is just going to be a lot of general advice, positioning, what the hero's job is. I'm going to be starting with my best heroes and then moving down the list. I'd like to preface this by saying that I am not the best player in the world. I'm not the best coach in the world. However, I do think I have made some accomplishments and have experience that kind of qualifies me to be giving advice and tips, stuff like that. Included is my rank and SR. In season 27, I peaked 3944, I believe, and then finished 3750. This season, I'm currently hovering around 3700 and peaked 3994. So my SR, not the best in the world, but it is in the higher elos, so I think that qualifies me, as well as the fact that I currently am a coach, and also in the past have coached multiple teams in CGL and other console leagues. However, CGL is the largest, and CGL is probably the most successful coaching experience I've had. In my description, in the description of this video, I will be linking a document that basically details why I have credibility and what my past experiences are, if any of you are curious. I also will be linking a document where you guys can sign up for private coaching. However, it is going to be paid, so just keep that in mind. But anyways, the document will explain everything in detail. Moving on, this video will be primarily centered towards console players. This doesn't mean that PC players can't benefit, but I do give settings advice and advice for sensitivities that would not really be beneficial to a PC player, due to the fact that, PC sensitivities on mouse and keyboard are very different than sensitivities on controller. So just keep that in mind. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first part of the video, we're going to go over settings. Heads up, the format of these videos is going to stay relatively the same throughout all of, the whole series. For my settings, on Widowmaker, it doesn't really matter per se what you run as long as you're comfortable with it. There are certain heroes where you should run higher or lower sensitivities. Widow's not really one of those, as long as you're comfortable enough to be able to hit your shots. That's really all that matters. So if you're comfortable in your own sensitivity, then just grind it out, get good with it, and learn the playstyle associated with it. If it's a high sensitivity, you're probably going to need to use positioning, like movement, for your fine adjustments, because you're going to be flicking a lot, and it might be a little bit harder to get those fine adjustments on such a high sensitivity. If you're on a lower sensitivity, you might need to use your movement for the majority of your large aim and all that stuff, or like your flicks and moving the crosshair long distances, because it just takes too long for you to use your analog stick, and you can't really flick as well. But you might make the fine adjustments with your analog stick, if that makes sense. So high sens, analog stick for major movements, movement for minor movements or minor adjustments. For lower sens, analog stick for minor adjustments, and movement for major adjustments. For me, at least, I like to run higher sensitivities on most of my heroes anyways. With Widowmaker, I tend to run a higher sens. You guys can pause the video whenever you'd like, if you'd like to try out my sensitivities and my settings. I use a very sticky sensitivity, however, it is still quite high. And then I'll explain some of my button binds. So my binds are different in the sense that quick melee is bound to left stick, crouch is bound to right stick, and interact is bound to B. So I bind my crouch and not toggle crouch. I bind crouch to right stick to make it easier to crouch spam while also being able to free aim. Because if you're crouching with B, you have to take your thumb off the analog stick to press B, which makes it really hard to aim while you're crouching. And you need to be able to aim while you're crouching so that you can dodge shots, but also return fire and hit your shots. So I've always found it useful to have it bound that way, and then I just bind left stick to melee because it's the most similar, and I don't know, it just feels right to me. Yeah, and then interact, the only time you're ever going to use interact in competitive or quick play is for a Symmetra teleporter, so it doesn't really matter what button you have your Sim TP bound to, so I just use B. But yeah, that's the reason I use my settings. If you have any questions, I'll answer them in the comment section. But yeah, as long as you're comfortable with your own sensitivity, it doesn't really matter what you're running per se on Widow. Game sense and angles is kind of what matters most, and we're going to get to that just in a second. Alright guys, so the basic job of Widowmaker, right? We're going to go over the basic job of Widowmaker before we go over individual scenarios and problems that Widowmakers typically face, etc., etc. The basic job of Widowmaker is to get picks, right? So, as Widow, your main, and excuse my handwriting, I'm going to be using like this drawing app, and hopefully, I'll get better as time goes on, but I'm not really the best. Main goal is to get picks, right? Get picks. So that's your main goal. It's what we want to be doing. As Widow, you get a pick, your team goes in, you're up 1, you're up 2, however many picks you've gotten them, right? You have a lot of potential. You're kind of grouped in with heroes like Hanzo, because your job isn't really to spam the shields. Like if it's all you can do, sometimes it's all you can do. But for the most part, your job is to find somebody that's out of position and punish mistakes. So if somebody's out of position, somebody's playing away from the tank line, somebody's kind of sequestered off by themselves, you take them out. So you're either A, getting elims, right? Or you're B, applying pressure. Because ideally, and right, this might not be the case if you aim, excuse my handwriting once again, for B, applying pressure. Applying pressure. So, right, A is kind of what we want to prioritize, but if we can't prioritize A, then we default to B, right? Because if we're not doing A, we should be doing B, as long as we're alive, which is what some of the main things we're going to work on, because a lot of Widows, they die and then they lose their value, right? As Widow, you have a lot of value just being alive and having a presence, because you're either A, getting elims when people are out of position. So like, let's say there's a Rhine shield, right? If there's a Rhine, right, and somebody moves away from his shield, they're out in the open, exposed, then, like let's say Rhine shield right here, right? The enemy team's Rhine. So like, I guess even enemy team's Rhine, right? And then over here is, let's say, a Zenyatta. I mean, that's not really what a Zenyatta looks like, but it's a little fat hitbox. So, let's say Zen's over here, and then you as Widow have a, this is your crosshair, and you're like, you're at a high ground position, and you're kind of just watching over the team fight. We should not be spamming shield here. We should be killing the Zen, right? So there's a lot of situations like this where there will be a hero, maybe not this blatant, where they're just like right out next to the shield, but it does happen. And there's other situations where like that Zen might be on high ground above the Rhine, like up here maybe, and then the Rhine's down here shielding most of the team, and then you pick off the Zen or whatever. So there's a lot of situations where people are out of position, you punish them, you get a pick, and then your team goes in, they win the fight, right? If you're not doing that, then we have our second option, which is B, applying pressure. So your goal should be to get elims, but if you're not getting elims and you're a good Widow, right, you're going to be applying pressure. And we're going to work on ways to keep you like always in the fight and always engaged, because if they have a hero that can kind of displace you and make it so you don't get pressure or don't get value, then you won't be able to do either of these. But we're going to work on it, and I'm going to give some tips and stuff. But essentially, if you're not doing A, then you have to be doing B, right? Because if you're not getting elims, then that means nobody's making mistakes on the enemy team. And that means that B, you can apply pressure so that they can only play in a certain area. Because if they can't peek you, then, you know, you can effectively shut down parts of the map so that they can't get value. This can be very, very powerful. And so yeah, we're going to work on ways to maximize the amount of pressure you can apply, because even if you're not doing A, eventually A will come around. Because if you're applying pressure, right, eventually somebody's going to crack under that pressure, or somebody's just going to be forced to play in other positions, because you're not the only one on your team applying pressure, right? The other 5 people on your team are going to be applying pressure and could be doing things as well. So eventually somebody will make a mistake, and then you do A, and then, you know, bingo bongo, you win, right? So yeah. Main goal is A, to get elims. If you can't do that, you do B, and you apply pressure. Hey guys, so now we're gonna start going over the individual scenarios that a Widow player will typically face, and what you can do to be a better Widow, and what typical Widows make mistakes on. So in the following clip, we see a Widow playing main choke of King's Row up against a Rhine that's shielding and a Widow that is scoped high ground. There's multiple mistakes here. So first of all, the Widow's spamming shield and ignoring the Widow on the high ground, correct? But then also, the Widow's playing main without a shield tank. So you should never be in the choke as Widow, unless you have a shield tank that's protecting you, because it leaves you very vulnerable to instances like that. You're also in the area where most of the damage is being spammed. So all in all, it's not the best place to be in. It can really make you a liability for a team. So what the Widow could have done better here is taken high ground, and then just taken out that Widow, and then they can go to shield spamming if that's all they have left to do. But there was a Widow that was perfectly exposed, and this Widow should have, you know, taken advantage of that, killed the Widow, and then if all there is to do is shield spam, then you shield spam. But the main mistakes that were made here were A, playing choke, and B, playing choke without a shield tank and ignoring the enemy Widow. Alright guys, so now we're going to look at situations in which, and angles that the defending Widow can take to either kill the enemy Widow or stay safe from the enemy Widow, if they know that the enemy Widow is a better aimer. So the first position that's shown is an aggressive position, and it's kind of just, it puts both the Widows on equal ground, and whoever's the better aimer is going to win. So in the example shown, the defending Widow wins. Now in the second example shown, it shows a way that the defending Widow could get value by still having a sightline down choke, but also can be safe from the enemy Widow who might be a better aimer than them. And there's a lot of positions on a lot of different maps that you can take that are similar to this, and I'll probably make some videos on areas of maps that you can go. But there's plenty of other YouTubers that have also made videos on angles that you can take for Widow, all the best spots on all the maps, and yeah, just practice like grinding this out and finding areas where you can stay away from a better sniper than you, a better Widow than you, but also you can still get value. Because remember, if we circle back to our A and B of A getting elims and B applying pressure, if we can't do A and we can't, like, you know, consistently get elims, we still want to apply pressure, and we got to be alive to do that. So you know, it's very important. And you can still do both. Like, even if a Widow is shutting down part of the map, you can still find value. So that's an example of that. And there will be more examples of how you can do this even as an attacking Widow. Alright guys, so real quickly I'm just going to run over some examples of defensive angles that you could hold when the enemy Widow might be a better aimer than you, but these angles will still get you value. I'm not really going to say much, I'm just going to let the clips play and let the clips speak for themselves. Alright guys, so now we're going to go over some basic usage of Widow's abilities and kind of what she's supposed to do with those abilities. So hook, there's Widow hook, right? Or grappling hook. Grappling hook is to either for utility or as an escape option. And I'll explain what that means in just a second. Utility or escape. Alright, so basically what that means is it's either utility and utility could, as long as it's getting value, right? So utility could be to gain a better vantage point, to gain high ground, something like that. To get to a position you otherwise wouldn't be able to. Maybe you need to get across somewhere super fast, so you need to bunny hop with your grappling hook, so that you don't get taken down and you can get to that position safely. Maybe you need to use it to push after you've gotten a pick off. Maybe you need to aggressively push someone that's low HP, anything like that. But it can also be used as an escape option. So let's say you're this little stick man. Let's say that's awful. Whatever. Let's say this little stick man's Widow, right? And then over here is Genji, right? Is his little shurikens, right? And Genji, right? He can dive you. He's a serious threat, right? But if you have grapple hook, then we can just hook away. When he dives us, he doesn't have dash, and then we're safe, right? Same could be said for heroes like Diva, Echo, Tracer. These are your main counters that you got to worry about, is Tracer, Genji, Echo, Diva. Winston is a big one, because Winston you can't really, typically you're not going to be able to take out a Winston, especially when he knows what he's doing. These are typically the main counters you got to worry about in terms of you being dove. Maybe a Doom in there as well. And Doom, once again, if he's getting a rollout or a combo on you, there's not going to be much you can do, so hook is probably going to be best in that scenario, unless you've already got some shots in on him. It's, typically situational. So there's hook, right? So let's put up here in little hook. Utility or escape. And then she still has her Venom Mine, right? So I'm actually going to play a clip in a second, or in a little bit, of proper way that you can use Venom Mine. But Venom Mine is essentially just insurance on flanks, and then it's also kind of an area denial device in a sense. So Venom Mine does 75 damage, I believe. Actually, I think they might have buffed it. I believe it's 75, right? Anti-flank, and then it's also, yeah, honestly, anti-flank's just the main one. But it's anti-flank because you can put it down on your person or somewhere where you could be flanked or dove, and then that's essentially 75 free damage. You can also use it when it hits someone, right, and it starts doing damage to them. As it's doing damage to them, it also gives you walls on them, so you can see them through walls, just like you would be able to with Infrasight or with Sonic Arrow from Hanzo, right? So that can be very valuable for you to line up shots. So sometimes it's worth it to just shoot it out into a team fight, but typically you're going to want to hold it for anti-flank, and just if somebody dives you to have that extra 75 damage, because as I'm going to show in a little bit, it can really change the tide of a fight. Like a Genji, right? A Genji, for example, he has 200 HP. If he dashes in, he's down to 125 once that Venom Mine has full effectiveness. A full charge body shot does 120. So as long as you can hit a full charge body shot, and then that Venom Mine, you basically just got to melee and spray, or melee or spray, and then he's going down. And that can be said for most of the squishies that can dive you. So it could be really valuable. And then Infra Sights circles back a lot to point B of what Widow's supposed to do. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to earlier in the video. But point B, right, where we need to apply pressure, Infra Sights is really helpful with this because it makes it so that people can't peek you. Because you have walls on them, it's arguably one of the most powerful ults in the game, right? Because you have walls on them. If they peek you, then they're very susceptible to you picking them off because they don't necessarily know where you are. You know where all of them are the entire time until your Infra Sights runs out, right? So it can be very powerful. If you're a defensive Widow, you normally want to use it as a counter ult, and then if you're an offensive Widow, you kind of want to use it just to get picks, and force teams to play a lot more contained and a lot more together, right? Because if you use sights, people can't peek corners anymore, because when they go to peek a corner, you're just going to nail them, right? Unless they have a shield tank. So it forces teams to play very restricted. They're not able to flank, really. Nobody's ever going to have the upper hand, like the benefit of surprise on their side. So it can give you a huge advantage. But primarily just use it to apply pressure. If you don't get picks off of it, but like you gain valuable positioning that's winning you fights, that's okay. Like it's not meant to be this ult that sets you up a highlight reel of a 6k every time, right? It's just meant to apply pressure and force bad positioning from the enemy team. Because, you know, even if you don't get picks, you could force the enemy team to back up, and then your team can push forward and take valuable positioning that could help them win the fight later on. So Infra Sights, just primarily use it to apply pressure. The key tip here would be if you're on defense as Widow, definitely just hold Sights until the attacking Widow pops it, even if you're charging it faster than her, for the most part. Rarely is it effective to use it otherwise, but typically just wait for the attacking Widow to pop it, because then she never has the upper hand, because your team will always have walls too, so it, you know, balances out. And if you're attacking Widow, just try your best to charge Infra Sights faster than the defending Widow, because that'll give you a huge advantage if you can use it and then have Sights up when she doesn't. So, that's basically, to quick overview, hook, either utility or escape, Venom Mine, anti-flank, and Infra Sights, apply pressure, right? And I'll show an example of Venom Mine. What's up, guys? Some final tips to round off. As pictured, place a Venom Mine at your feet if you're having trouble with Genji, Doomfist, D.Va, anybody diving directly onto you as Widow and making contact with you. Just put a Venom Mine at your feet. It's free damage, makes killing them and taking them out a lot easier. Additionally, know that high ground is going to make shots easier to hit for you. Always. No matter what level of aim you're at, high ground's always going to make hitting shots easier for you. So just do your best to gain high ground as much as you can, as many times as you're permitted. There's going to be some times when you're going to get pressured so much that it's going to be more valuable to play low ground, maybe behind a tank shield for a little bit. Like, let's say a D.Va's just controlling all the high ground and diving you whenever you play high ground, to the point where you need to have hook for escape or something like that, you know? That's a rare situation, but it does happen, so in that situation, don't play high ground as much. But for the most part, try and take high ground. It really can make the difference. Additionally, know that you can one-shot combo a Tracer and a Baby D.Va without needing to hit the headshot. A fully charged body shot will do 120 damage. With a melee, will do 35, meaning you can combo them for 155 damage. And they're both 150 HP, so it can be perfect for finishing them off if you're having some trouble. Hey guys, I'd just like to round off by saying thank you if you watched this all the way through, and also thank you for those of you that also just checked in to see what this was all about. I realize this is the first video in the series, and things are definitely not perfect, so I'd like any criticism, any ideas as to what I could do better, what I'm not doing well enough on, what I'm doing well, etc. In the comment section would be wonderful. And if you have any questions or think that I explained something wrong or was outright just wrong about a concept, then throw it in the comments as well. Also, check the description. There will be links to, of course, as I mentioned earlier in the video, my document with all of my previous coaching experience and credibility, in a sense. And then I'll also link the document if any of you would like to sign up for private coaching with me. So I hope you all learned something, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.